Good afternoon. This is the Jail Resources Team meeting. It is Thursday, June 30, 2022, and it's 2 in the afternoon. Any members of the public who would like to follow this meeting, they can join us by a live stream on the Thurston County YouTube channel. My name is Referral Trends. I am the county manager. And at this point, I will hand over the agenda to Leah Landon. She is our senior program manager, Law and Justice Senior Program Manager for Thurston County. Go ahead, Leah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully a few more folks join us as well, but we will go ahead and get started. First, going to go ahead and start with introductions. We can go ahead and start with the people that we have in the room with us today. So like Ramiro said, my name is Leah Landon. I am the Thurston County Criminal Justice Regional Program Manager. And
I am Sarah DeVell, Commissioner Mejia's assistant, sitting in for the commissioners today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nicole Miller, Racial Equity Program Manager for Thurston County.
Megan Porter, Public Information Supervisor.
Brandy Miranda, Administrative Assistant.
all right, and then for folks we have on Zoom, Patrick, do you want to start?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Patrick O'Connor, Director of Public Defense.
Nicole.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nicole Carbone with Pretrial.
Andre.
Captain Andre Muldrew, Operations Captain, Corrections Bureau.
Under Sheriff Brady.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Ray Brady, the Undersheriff over at the Sheriff's Office.
Judge Wilson.
Good afternoon, Judge Mary Sue Wilson, Superior Court Presiding Judge. Nice to see you all.
Jason.
Jason B. Mortensen, Thurston Basin BHASO, Thurston County Thurston County Lead Program Manager.
Wonderful. And then we just had a few folks join us here in the meeting room as well, so we'll give them a chance to get settled. And then Christy and John, do you want to introduce yourselves?
John Tunheim, Prosecutor.
Christy Peters, Chief of Staff, Prosecutor's Office.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So thank you so much, everybody. We're going to go ahead and move on to the first agenda item. Oh, we have one more. Wayne, do you want to introduce yourself once you get seated?
I look someplace and you take
Right there.
Wayne for the Prosecutor's Office.
Perfect.
You may want to come to the front so you can be in the frame.
Oh,
Right.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
All right. So the first item we have on the agenda is the 365 plus population updates and discussion. Patrick or Christy, I don't know which one of you wants to provide the beginning of that update.
Pat, do you want me to just start going through and you chime in if I miss anything?
Sure. I'll check you against what I've got.
Awesome. Okay, so the list that I'm going off of was initially June 13th, but I updated it as of the 27th, so June 27th to ensure that it was close. My read of both the 13th and the 27th was that the numbers had not changed specifically regarding anyone who had been in custody 365, actually I went down to 340 days, so a little lower than the 365. Richard Melvin Connor is actually Mr. Graham's case. I don't know, Wayne, why don't you give an explanation on that?
Okay, so Mr. Connor's case has been ongoing obviously for quite some time. He has had 3 separate stints at Western State for restoration. And that's relevant. I don't recall the number, but for people here, it's usually 90, then 180 days. They can up it to 3 times. And I know at least twice, if not all 3 times, he did all of those timeframes up at Western State. He'd be restored and was medication compliant, but then when he returned to the jail, he would stop taking his medications, he would decompensate, a new evaluation would obviously hold that he was not competent, didn't have the capacity to go forward. So we did that 3 times. And so a lot of the time frame that I know Christy's referenced as far as his time in our jail, he really wasn't in our jail. He was actually up at Western State Hospital receiving services. Having said that, upon his latest return, he is still not taking his medications, but apparently has not decompensated to the level that the attorney feels that she needs a new evaluation. Every time I talk with her, though, that's an issue because he is very difficult and sometimes it has a hard time grasping what's going on, but he seems fairly consistent, at least the last number of hearings. It's been complicated with COVID. 2 of the state's witnesses were co-defendants and they're in prison. Yeah.
Right, just to make sure that this meeting is recorded, it's being recorded, so if there's any information you don't feel comfortable sharing, just.
No, I appreciate that, Romero, and all of this would basically be public record.
Okay.
Two of the state's witnesses are in DOC facilities, and with COVID, DOC was not allowing people to come in and interview them. So that's only recently changed. One of the witnesses is currently housed over at Airway Heights, and we've developed a relationship, or I reached out and talked to their peer counselor to make sure that that person is available either in person via Zoom. The defense attorney's investigator is trying to coordinate an opportunity of whether they want to travel all the way over to Airway Heights or try and do it remotely. So that interview should be taking place. One of the other, two of the other state's witnesses were actively being prosecuted by my office. So that created some problems as far as having defense attorneys with active cases in our office being witnesses on this case. One of them has since gone to prison and come back, so he still is willing to talk. He's actually the victim of the case. The other witness still has an ongoing allegation of a sexual assault with one of my other witnesses in the case. So I wanted to be sure you can't create the amount of angles that have gone on here. His case is still ongoing. And so I've spoken with the attorney who represents that particular defendant. He's obviously not super keen in talking with me because our office still has active Class B felony sexual assault charges against him. So we've been navigating that. So there's just a lot of pieces that have been moving here with COVID and other obligations. Finally, one of the other witnesses unfortunately has passed away, but that's not relevant for the delay. But those I think are the most relevant hurdles that has just continued this case out. It's not been just one thing. It's been a number. And I have to wrap in, the current defense attorney is the second defense attorney. So we had to start the case all over again when the new counsel came on. So we're combining all of those things in regards to the delay for this particular defendant. I know Christy will speak to the others.
Well, and the other important thing I think that Wayne could also add is that all of the charges he's looking at, assault first, burglary 1, robbery in the first degree with deadly weapon, all Class A felonies, he is looking at a lot of time on standard range, 20, 30-year range. So although he has been in custody outside of the competency hearings back and forth for a total of just shy of 6 years, his standard range is well over triple, if not quadruple that. So it's not like he's been in detention. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's not being detained anywhere close to what the standard range would be for any one of the multiple offenses.
100%. He's maxed out. Like Christy said, any one of those charges is well beyond the time these go. That's just one of them. As she's indicated, you have firearm enhancements. These are all Class A felonies. His sentence is in the 30s, so it's not even close. But that doesn't minimize how we want to try and get the case going forward. Just with all those wrinkles, I want to make sure.
He does have a trial date.
He does have a trial date of July 25th. I'll leave that there.
Pat, anything to add?
Nope, trial scheduled for next month.
Yep. So I'll try to move a little quicker through. The next person in custody, Jonas Davis, trial is scheduled for October. This is a Class A felony child sex offense case. There were some changes in both prosecution and defense counsel on this case as part of that. Again, the defendant is looking at triple time based on what he's been held, but all of the parties in this case appear that this one will be going in October. And I know that both of the defense counsel on this case are out of TCPD, and Pat and I have been in contact with all of the attorneys on that case, and I believe Mr. Davis will be going to trial in October. The next one is Mr. Topate. He is scheduled for jury trial August 22nd. Again, multiple very serious Class A felony charges. All of the parties feel confident that this case will be one of the priority trials going forward in August. The next one is Michael Brower. He was convicted of homicide. He is awaiting sentencing to be set. It's a contested sentencing with witnesses in August. He will be going to Department of Corrections shortly after that sentencing is completed. The next one is Mr. Tove. He is scheduled for jury trial August 15th. 5 Class A felonies, assault 2, burg 1, kidnapping 1, robbery 1, very serious charges. Again, his standard range is over triple, if not quadruple, the time that he'd be looking at of what he's been held. The next one is Victor Victoria. He was also convicted and he is awaiting sentencing. It is scheduled for next week, July 11th, or excuse me, week after next, July 11th. Bradley Sprouse. That's another child incest in the first degree, rape of a child in the first degree, set for a jury trial August 15th, private defense counsel. That's not a TCPD case. Next one is Jamison Orth, jury trial scheduled also for August. This is a, let's see, attempted murder in the first degree, possession of stolen firearm. Parties appear ready to go to trial. August 15th. Bradley Sprouse, we just talked about, that's his second case. He was arrested on his second charges shortly after the first charges. Dena Braga, jury trial also set for August. This is assault in the second degree and law enforcement assault in the third degree. Again, parties believe that that case is set to go, confirmed in August. Justin Lewis, that matter, the defendant is currently at Western State Hospital for competency restoration. Martinez Montalvo, scheduled for jury trial in August. That's arson in the first degree, murder in the first degree. Kyle Harstead, already convicted, set for sentencing, I believe it's September 14th. Pat, is that the same information you have on that one? Harstead? Yep, okay, cool.
Sorry, I'm talking. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Next one, Ashley Butch, jury trial the first week of August. That's a conspiracy to commit murder, second degree domestic violence. Multiple, next we come up with multiple co-defendants on the same case. Joseph Larson, Helen Richardson, there's assault in the second degree, extortion, homicide by abuse, murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree. There are at least, looks like 9 or 10 charges for each individual. That is going to be a multiple co-defendant trial. I'm sure that this is on Judge Wilson's radar. I'm scheduled for the August week, to start the week of August 8th. And that will be a very lengthy trial based upon all of the defendants. My assumption, I think all the parties' assumption is that if that gets confirmed, that will be a priority trial for many reasons, but the coordination of all.
I'm sorry, each defendant will have individual trials. It will be a single trial for all of them?
Correct, correct. But it will need a lot of space at the front of the courtroom because there are separate defense attorneys for each defendant.
Was that pre-assigned by chance?
Let me ask, Your Honor.
Yes, it was Judge Dixon.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I was thinking
Okay.
it got pre-assigned.
Okay, then the next one that's not part of that multiple co-defendant is Sergey Snyder. That is also scheduled for a competency September 13th, so being in the process of being restored. Christopher Reinhold, scheduled for trial September 12th. Unlawful possession of firearm, criminal impersonation, first degree. Just for everyone's purposes, we really jumped down from 6 years in custody. We're in the 1 year, just over a year in custody right now, like the defendants that I'm talking about. Ronald Clayton, scheduled for jury trial week of July 11th. Attempted murder in the first degree, attempted rape in the first degree, although Mr. Clayton, I don't believe, was on trial confirmation this morning. Judge Wilson, is that consistent with your recollection? We were both in trial confirmations this morning. I don't believe.
I was just gonna pull up his case on Odyssey.
Okay.
He was not on confirmation today, so maybe, hang on a second.
He may have already had another date that the parties confirmed for, which was different from when I pulled this last week.
He's set for jury trial October 10th.
Okay, I thought that was it. I think that's the realistic date for both. That's a Christian Cabrera and Brandy Archer, Pat, correct? In your info?
Yeah.
Next one is Sierra Larson. She's scheduled for a jury trial August 22nd. And then the last individual that's been just over a year is Guillermo Othan, scheduled for a jury trial. Actually, he has 2 jury trials scheduled, one for August 25th and one for September 26th. And then I did just go a little bit beyond. I can say that the next one was Eli Yates. There's an evidentiary hearing that was held this week. I don't know the outcome of that. It's regarding competency. He's another competency asterisk, I guess, individual. Then Wagoner would be the next one. That is scheduled for jury trial August 18th. Jason Lawrence, another competency issue hearing for restoration before the court October 10th. And then Byron Boucher, again, another competency issue set for July 11th. So I don't know, roughly, what did you hear? Maybe 5 or 6 are competency issues. The others, every case now has a trial date. So.
How long is it typically between the verdict and sentencing?
It depends on the case.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it can be fairly quickly, within a week or so if it's, but on, a case like a homicide case, any sex offense case, they're going to need to have a PSI. The Brower case that I mentioned, they're bringing in witnesses on both sides, and so that's going to be a longer process.
And the nature of the cases, like Christy was talking about, we're not talking about simple cases. So with the types of those charges, the defense wants to try and present mitigating information, and so that does take a little bit more time than a normal case.
Yeah.
But I think it's wonderful that everything is moving forward. They all have trial dates now, so that's.
We were excited to see that.
It's very
There's a date set for everything that's on here. I mean, there you go.
That's wonderful.
At least on its face, it's realistic.
Yeah, exactly.
We were setting dates during COVID, but
Those were not
the
realistic.
reality was, we were pretty sure they weren't gonna go,
Sounds like
right?
a lot of work for the next 3 months.
It does.
A lot of work.
August is going to be extremely busy.
Yeah.
And going forth beyond that.
Are there any questions?
I'll just add a couple comments if there's any questions. I'm happy to try to answer any. I think my review of the list when we last looked at it was 27. This time it's 25. I don't know if that's our new baseline going forward. Hopefully, obviously we want to get less, but I didn't. Those are pretty similar to the last time we looked at the over 365. I think other factors, of course, are it's summer and summer months. And in addition to both sides have seen COVID impact trials, not from the attorneys, but from witnesses, complaining witnesses, professional experts. So we have, COVID impacts on, interested parties in a case, testifying witnesses, and then summer months. So, there's a whole host of other factors that drive unanticipated delays in these cases. So I just think it's worth putting that out there, that it's challenging for everybody when a case is ready to go, but a witness comes down with COVID or something else happens, or someone's unanticipated, leave or things like that do also result in continuances that weren't anticipated despite the best efforts of the attorneys.
Any questions then? Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Christy and Patrick, for that update. I know that took a lot of time for you to do, and I really appreciate you doing it and going through it with me too, like we did a month or so ago. It was really, really helpful. Up next, one of the second priorities that the JRT had talked about addressing is the number of people in the jail that have mental illnesses, substance use disorders, and are really high need. We've kind of talked about that a few times now, but I know Wayne has been doing some work talking to people at the jail as well as with DSHS on the triage center over by the jail. So I was hoping, Wayne, maybe you could share some of those conversations with folks today and just let us know kind of what you're finding and what you're hearing and the things that you're thinking about moving forward.
No, and I appreciate that, Leah. And actually, it's kind of apropos. there's a couple things, and I appreciate Andre and Ray being here. Mr. Connor created kind of the impetus of me and our office, frankly, trying to develop a compelled medication program in our jail. It was very frustrating to me that we would spend all this time and all this energy in getting him restored at Western State, and then he'd come back, refuse his medications, and we'd go right back to square one. So I've been working with the chief, and in fact, we just had a DSHS statewide meeting in regards to this particular issue. The only county in Washington that has a compelled medication program in their jail is King County. It's the only one. Chief Toma has expressed some interest in it, and we're exploring how to go about that. It obviously weaves in like what Christy's talking about with some of these restoration and Western State cases. We'd have to modify some of our processes before they go to Western State, because if the order allows them to be compelled medications at Western State, then that would almost automatically then come back and apply in our jail once we had a program that met both medical and our court's requirements. So I'm touching on that because Richard came up today. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do to minimize a lot of these things that you're hearing. You've got a good 20% of our folks are mentally ill folks, and the system's just not working as well as it could. So that was one kind of easy area that I thought we could maybe try and modify. So that's one that I hadn't planned on talking about actually today, but it seemed relevant. We've also continued to explore the use of our True Blood program and getting some service while somebody is out in the community. They were in our jail, and Patrick knows that our office on particular cases we'll try and see if we can have some services for an individual that would otherwise be detained in our jail out in the community, and see if we can get some mental health services to them outside the facility. So that's still a program that we're working with and continuing to expand. The one that Leah is talking about specifically kind of came, they all weave in. Dr. Thomas Kinlan is the forensic director for the department for Western State for their forensic mental health services. And in speaking with him is how I got involved with the statewide compelled medication forum. But then talking, we all have, and Ramiro knows this, our triage facility, just kitty corner adjacent basically to the jail, I don't think is being used for what everybody thought it was going to be used for. And I know Joe was on there, there's Joe, and Mark Friedman and Joe and Jason at the TMDHO, and I've had a lot of conversations on potentially using that resource for something that really makes sense. And so what my thoughts were, our office's thoughts were, is that we would create a forensic bed here in Thurston County, restoration services here in Thurston County. The reference that I'll make is 1077. That's the criminal statute. 7105 is the folks that are detained that are a danger to themselves or others. Jason and Joe's and Mark would like to hopefully see some of those beds there too, because our current local system just is not able to deal with the violence that some of those people exhibit. And so they'll either end up in jail one way or the other because they'll act out and commit an assault or do something else, where if we could have had them maybe in a more secure facility, that might have never happened. So with any kind of a project like that, it always comes down to funding. I've talked with Commissioner Menzer, and he's on board with at least exploring some opportunity here. The biggest sells that I've got for this is that the county's already spending some money when they're in the jail. So there's already some money being spent in detaining these folks while they're in a facility waiting to go to Western State. And oftentimes the needs of those individuals take up more than just a one bed cost. They'll be in a 4-person pod and they're the only one in there. So they're actually taking up 4 beds. So there's already a cost associated with detaining that person at the county level. Then there's already a cost associated at the state level when they get to Western State and are restoring them. So money's already being spent on these individuals. So you're not just starting at ground zero. On top of that, we already have a facility. Now, it would need to be retrofitted out to be a secure facility, but we already have a facility with beds. So that's the kind of the big picture idea. I had pitched that to Dr. Kinlan, who then put me in contact with Kevin Bovenkamp, who's the Assistant Director of the Department of Social and Health Services. So he is second in charge. He's actually somebody that can make decisions. And so right now, we're coordinating with TMDHO, who currently think, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, you lease the facility, or I'll defer to Joe's, the ownership aspect, but the reason is they're the ones that are contracted for the facility right now. We're gonna have a site visit with, the chief, probably an assistant attorney general, to make sure I'm not getting Department of Social Health Services in something they shouldn't be doing. Mr. Bovenkamp, Mr. Kinlan, and Ty, and obviously some other people from our office, just to kind of, what I'm saying is to put a vision, or a visual to the vision. And then once they see what we're talking about, that's next steps. Mr. Bovenkamp seemed to be real excited about I sold this as a pilot program. And he expressed, he's kind of tired of King County and Snohomish County always getting the money from the state for pilot programs. Why not Thurston County? And so when I had my meeting with him, I was he was far more excited about it than I ever could have anticipated. So right now, that's the next step, is getting us into the door with somebody that's got some money and saying, what can we do? And then obviously, there's gonna be some funding from the county side at some level as well. But to start looking at some of these huge costs, if we can get somebody restored sooner than later and get them through the system, I mean, the savings, I mean, Christy was talking, at least 5, 6 of those people are here because of mental health issues, because we can't get them the services they need. So let's get them the services they need and then resolve the case one way or the other. So that's kind of the big picture goal there that I know Lee has heard about a little bit. If anybody has any questions on that, I hope I covered most of it.
Are there any questions?
That sounds very intriguing pilot.
Yeah, it'd be a game, as John and Christy and I have talked.
When are you planning to have the site visit?
I'm working with Mr. Bovenkamp, and like Patrick said, unfortunately, summertime, it's tough to get 7 schedules together in person now. Everybody can meet Zoom, but this you can't do via Zoom. But
When you narrow down the date, could you share the date?
I will make sure. Yep,
Thank you.
okay.
Could you just cover the location again? I missed that.
It's over at the triage, Ray. The triage, right there, kind of next building over from the jail, the telecare facility.
Thank you.
And Wayne, just to clarify, this is Joe. So that building is owned by Thurston County. We manage the lease with Telecare. And so Telecare is the provider. And right now it's 100% civil commitment population for those 11 beds. And currently under construction to add 6 more beds, I believe. 6 more beds for long-term civil commitment on the other side.
The remodel to extend this to 6 beds, what is the schedule? Do you have a date?
I don't have a date. Mark is the point person on that one. I know there were certainly some delays due to supply issues that I think everybody's going through right now. But I think it is still on track to be open at some point this year. I just don't have the date. Once I get that, Ramiro, I'll get that back to you.
That was my understanding as well, Ramiro, is they expected it to be finished before the end of the year.
Patrick has a hand up.
Yeah, Patrick.
Yeah, I'll just add, just to this conversation, I know Captain Muldrew probably has some thoughts on this too, but, one of the, as you've heard, there's a number of these cases and other cases right behind them where, the individual is found to be legally incompetent, right? Baseline competency. Do you know what court proceedings are and the like? And so we continue to see individuals with such high acuity that they don't even pass baseline legal competency. And once that happens, usually it's the defense attorney that will raise that issue. They'll be evaluated and found to be incompetent. And then DSHS is ordered to restore that individual at Western State Hospital. And as Judge Wilson routinely sees, they're unable to comply with those orders. And defense counsel brings motions every week to enforce those orders, that individual who's in our custody that's legally incompetent is transported to Western State Hospital, and they can routinely are unable to comply with that. And so this is one avenue to try to relieve that stress there. But obviously that's not the system we want. It forces a lot of complications for corrections and the entire process. But just so everyone has some perspective, these individuals should be getting the care and custody and treatment that they're entitled to by law. But due to a variety of factors that I won't get into, and I don't know all of them, but this is one of the challenges, is getting somebody to restorations proceeding timely.
And I'd just like to add just what I agree with everything that Wayne had put forward, and also Patrick, is that, the high needs individuals that we have incarcerated here, along with, the amount of violent offenders that we have, it really restricts our housing that we have here available in the jail. And that is what, it bottlenecks the jail as a whole. And you put COVID on top of that, our population right now is like 230 inmates at this time, which seems, it's like half of the population that we've built to hold. But really, at this point, that is all the space that we have available due to COVID, the mentally ill offenders, the violent offenders, in which one offender is taking up a space, like Wayne said, an area built for 3 or 4 individuals in our transfer area. The transfer area was never built to house inmates, and that has become a major housing area for us here in the jail. We never thought that would happen when the jail was built, but it is a mainstay of our housing. Housing population for the inmates, for our female inmates, we just don't have that. We're in the middle of making moves at this point because we've had an outbreak in the jail now of COVID. So we are moving one housing unit to another housing unit, and using that transfer area for our new arrestees, and then isolation area. So all of these high need inmates, we do need to make it a priority to find some alternative housing for them. The jail just isn't built to hold them, but I feel that at this point, the jail is being used as a mental health facility, which we know that shouldn't happen. The restoration that we send people to Western State, most times, or a lot of times, we're sending people to Western State multiple times. So not just one time they get restored and come back. They come back, they decompensate again before the trial gets started. We send them to Western State again. So these individuals that have been here, over the year, 6 months, a year, and more than a year, it is those high need inmates, and they are taking up a lot of space in which other individuals could be using at this time, and just makes things less complicated for staff and inmates themselves.
Question. So Joe, I don't know if you can answer this, maybe Wayne could answer it, but is the concept here that we would take some of the civil beds and convert them to criminal forensic beds, or the entire facility? And if there's a mixture of civil and criminal, is there any licensing issues that get in the way of that? I'm just curious as if you can have a mixed facility like that, criminal and civil.
Well, I can say the concept is criminal, is getting
The whole facility would be criminal.
criminal. Then,
Okay.
and having said that, Mark and Joe have said, well, maybe is there a way for some long-term civil? And so that was, the conversations are still ongoing. But Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was definitely, the idea was to provide it as a release valve for our jail and that jail population.
Yeah.
I do think at least for the 6 beds that are currently under construction, that was under a grant to add 6 long-term civil commitment beds. So that side might need to stay civil commitment, the 6 beds that are under construction. But the other 10 beds are, I think, are up for grabs. So
Does that cause you any issues to have criminal and civil in the same facility?
Not us. I don't think there's a licensing issue either. I could be wrong on that. The payment is a question I have about, because I think that's 100% state funded on the forensic side. The civil side is 100%, or not 100%. That's also state funded, so we should be fine there too. It might make it difficult for the provider. I don't know, and so right now that's telecare. But again, it just depends. They might be fine with it as well, or it might be that we have to look for a new provider too. So those are things to be determined once this project gets further along, for sure.
And this may be putting the cart before the horse, but if we were to be able to do something like this, it's my understanding currently that not all of the people at the triage center are from Thurston County, correct? There are people who. So would there be a way for us to ensure that this facility would only then be for Thurston County residents that are coming out of the correctional facility.
The idea, and I can joke, on the 10 beds, if we're having to differentiate those beds, the 10 beds, I think there would be an ability to focus, if those are Thurston County beds. Obviously, there's gonna be some state collaboration that goes on because of funding. The other 6, I think, would still remain, if a DCR can find a bed, they find a bed, and they put them there.
Right.
Right, that's correct. The 6 beds for the long-term civil commitment, they have to be a statewide resource. That's a condition of the grant. That said, most of the time, they are being filled by Thurston or Mason residents, because especially with telecare being the provider for 3 facilities within the same region, they will essentially just transfer people from their short-term evaluation and treatment beds over to a long-term civil commitment bed within their same network. So most of the time they are Thurston folks.
I would think then, given the pilot nature of this and why we're doing it, that what we do is seek a provision in the contract, a lease that says that it's for Thurston County folks. And so that would become a provision in the lease agreement.
Yeah, I think that would be important because, you know, if it is truly a pilot and this is a new resource for everybody, other counties may see it and get very excited and then want to put someone in there as well. So making sure that we have it for our facilities to use, I think is really important. But
Well, and I always worry too that the state actors don't always look at issues county by county, right? And so they tend to start looking at things of, well, we got, you know, this bed's empty, maybe we could throw somebody in there from Grays Harbor County or whatever, because they're looking at that level, right? So it's a very good point to make sure that we are, if we at least get priority, if not exclusivity.
Right.
And in talking, I apologize, remember just real quick on what Lee brought up, in talking with Mr. Bovenkamp, that's exactly it. Right now, the sentiment from the state level is to push the restoration services back to the county of origin. In fact, we're gonna start out of custody restoration in 2023 here in Thurston County. It's already started in King and Spokane and Pierce. And so we're next to develop it in 2023. And so that's the statewide level, is to push it back. So the idea in the pilot that I think I've sold to Mr. Bovenkamp is exactly that. Hey, this is your local way to take care of your local people. And so the pilot is, if this works, then use that and however you need to morph it into that other local community so you can have your own local resource. That's definitely been the focus of the conversation.
And following up on this conversation, whether it's for Thurston County only or not, on this pilot project, based on your description, it may require this facility to have some additional improvements related to security.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and it will maybe the program may need to access state grants. We need to make sure that those state grants don't have those strings attached, similar to what,
Yep.
Right.
you know,
The civil side.
the set aside. So, I think it's, you know, a great pilot to explore, really, because as Captain stated, there's a lot of pressure at the jail at this point, those inmates, and but we just need to make sure that, you know, understanding what we're committed to in terms of the funding and where the funding could come from.
And what I could do at our next meeting is obviously give an update. I can work with Christy on making sure I understand where those numbers are for those people. But obviously, Dr. Kinlan is getting me numbers for how many Western State 1077 restoration orders does Thurston County do a year. So we can actually start seeing the overall, instead of just a snapshot of right now, you're looking at this resource going forward, because it's the whole idea, if you build it, they will come. I'd be willing to bet we'll have 10 beds filled from Thurston County at all times.
Yeah.
But the idea is they get there quicker and they get out quicker. That's the whole idea. So
No, I think it's a really great idea, and I'm happy that you're continuing to explore it, and obviously however I can support that, let me know. And I think this group is a great group to have those conversations with, so thank you again for sharing it with all of us. I know when I asked you, I was like, please talk about it. So, no, are there any other questions?
Just one thing I'd just like to clear up. So I know throughout the county, we do have different treatment centers throughout the county, but what makes it different with some of the individuals that we have incarcerated here is, you know, they're violent. Therefore, they're needing that hardened facility. Now, we were speaking about the building here in front of the jail. I know that we have some offenders there, but I just don't know the level of offenders that they have there. And would that facility be one that we could place some of the offenders that we have here currently incarcerated?
It'd have to be built out, Andre.
Okay.
It's not currently, that was like what Romero was talking about. It would need improvements to become a secure facility for sure. So there's layers to the onion, and that would be one that would have to occur for the population that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, Wayne, like you mentioned, getting those numbers from Dr. Kinlan on how many of those orders are coming forward to Western State Hospital, it might be possible for us to kind of forecast out how much money is spent per year, and, you know, would it reduce some of those costs, building this facility? Would those costs be outweighed by adding the additional build out, the security, outweigh the cost of sending people to Western State, having them come back to jail, and maybe crunching some of those numbers to get a better idea for.
No, and that's absolutely gonna be part of the process, but I know it is, and again, I get it, especially in this room, oftentimes we focus on the cost, but Patrick is kind of sitting there as well. We have an opportunity to take better care of these people too, and that's gotta be balanced in, and I think that's really the selling point is, you know, granted, I think in this county more often than some, you know, defense and the state are on the same side of a conversation. This one would get the jail on the same side, the community on the same side, hopefully the commissioners on the same side, because everybody's seeing the value of it, not only from a financial standpoint, but just from a what's right standpoint, I guess.
Right, and I guess, you know, just to reiterate too, this is a topic area that the JRT determined was like the #2 priority, right? That we really want to discuss and as we move forward, work on addressing. So I'm very excited that we're having these conversations. I think it's really wonderful. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, well, it is the prosecuting attorney's show today. Any updates?
Isn't it every day?
Right. Do you all have any updates on Blake decision or COVID-19?
I can go over the Blake and Patrick chime in. You may want to get a little update kind of on your status on Blake as well. But let me start by giving the Blake numbers just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page. There's essentially 3 primary numbers or statistics that we're tracking with state v. Blake cases. And one is how many vacate orders are entered. Now, a vacate is the relatively quicker, simpler, everyone is on the same page that there was a prior UPCS and that the case needs to be vacated. Sometimes along with that, there is legal financial reimbursement that goes with that and connects with that. So we're tracking that as the second statistic that we're tracking. So vacate orders, we're tracking them monthly. Legal financial cost, we're tracking that monthly. And then the more complicated Blake case is a resentencing. That can involve multiple years of criminal history. Oftentimes the defendants are in correction facilities that have to be coordinated for the hearings. And so it's a much more complicated situation. I don't know, Patrick, do you have anything else to add on those 3 different types of Blake statistics that we're tracking?
No, that's all right.
Okay, so essentially, and actually I should ask the court too, Your Honor. Does the court have any other input? Okay, good. Okay, so just to kind of refresh everybody, we started Blake as a county addressing it actually in April of 2021, but that was before the county allotted positions for the prosecutor's office, the court, the clerk, defense. And so we were all just kind of handling it internally, putting these cases on a calendar here or there, and it was very small numbers of cases, but we did start in April. But the vacates did not start in earnest until July of 2021. And then also along with the vacate orders was when we also started the legal financial reimbursement. So just to give everybody kind of a ballpark of what happened in 21 to compare to what we're doing so far in this first 6 months, I have through last Friday of June, so not all of June, but most of the 6 months of 2022 to share. Vacate orders entered in 2021, 546. Legal financial reimbursement in the total of 2021 was just over $100,212 was reimbursed. And resentencings in 2021 was 81. That was in over 8 months. So far in 2022, We have now done, as of last Friday, 640 vacates. We have reimbursed $249,466, so 2.5 times what was done in approximately the same period last year. And we've resentenced 73 individuals. And that's in 6 months versus 8 months as far as the resentencings. So definitely seeing an uptick. Just to get an idea of the last 2 months, May and June together, because they really started increasing, just May and June together of 2022, we had 195 vacates, over $70,000, $70,036 just in May and June. And then 7 resentencing hearings. The reason why I think you'll agree with me, the reason why the resentencing hearings are reduced or slower than the vacates is that both offices have struggled with completing the staffing of the Blake positions. Would you agree with that, Patrick?
Well, I can only speak, from our perspective. We've had one attorney and one legal assistant doing Blake work. We were down one attorney for the last 6 months. So yeah, we've slowed down a little bit there, but obviously, with, at least with the resentencings, right? It's it's a finite number that have only been decreasing over time. So there will continue to be less as the months tick along.
How many vacancies do you have for the Blake, just the Blake?
This is just
How many vacancies?
Oh, I'm sorry. In our office, we have 1 vacancy for the attorney. One of our Blake positions is full, and our Blake staff position is full, as well as our Blake advocate position. So the person that calls all the victims from the past cases and that kind of thing.
Patrick, how many vacancies do you have for the Blake? Just one.
It'll soon to be 3. I can get into the details of personnel, but we have 3 positions. They've been full. But with some other vacancies in our office and permanent roles, those individuals have applied for those, and so they'll be transitioning to full time. So we'll be out recruiting those Blake vacancies. Actually, hopefully by next week we'll have a posting.
For everyone's benefit, I believe we will be able to still on some level keep moving forward on vacate orders and the legal financial reimbursements, because those are not obviously we don't have capacity everywhere in the offices, but it's something that we can move forward on a slower basis. The resentencing are much more complicated. We really need full staffing there for the resentencing piece. On both sides, and the court and the clerk and everyone.
What is the average time for resolution of what resentencing? Just curious.
It depends.
That was an attorney's response.
I had a law professor tell me that's the right answer to every legal question.
That's right.
And it should always be started, what I hear you say. So in case I misunderstood.
Well, I can speak to that a little bit because, it all starts with defense counsel, right? So the resentencings start with us. The vacates start with us.
Yep.
So my sense of a resentencing is we have to work with the Department of Corrections and have in remote contact, remote visits with clients. It's a very slow process, right? We can't just go to the jail and see the client. They're somewhere incarcerated in the state of Washington. And we've been incredibly vigilant, as I promised corrections early on, that we would not be transporting or requesting transports for Blake resentencings. And I think to date, maybe we've had a couple early on, but we've consistently not had those individuals transported. But it takes time. It's arduous and has been arduous. I'll say it's complicated. So it does depend on the complexity. We prioritize different phases. So the phase 1 of resentencings is for our attorneys to identify those who stood to be released from the department pursuant to Blake in the first phase. We've concluded those, then move on to the second phase where somebody resentenced would be looking at another additional 12 months. And we're almost through that entire phase. And then we started getting into individuals that are serving, 30, 50-year sentences that are entitled to be resentenced, but their resentencing won't result in an immediate release. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we don't have anybody today that if resentenced this afternoon could get credit for time served and be released. I'm pretty sure we're past all those individuals.
Hey, Patrick, you know, the resentencing 81 on the overall 2021, so far in 2022, 73. What is the queue? How many overall cases? Do we count?
Yeah.
I'm just
Well,
curious.
I can tell you the early numbers and the projections where there were over 14,000 individuals convicted of Blake convictions since 1991 in Thurston County. So how many have reached out to our office, requesting vacation only? I'd have to pull the spreadsheet. I'm sorry. I'm in isolation, so I'm doing my best here to not cough. We have, you know, thousands of people to go. It's just, frankly, and this is a PSA to the public, because many people still don't know they're eligible for a vacation of their criminal conviction. And so, you know, we've made ourselves available, but I mean, there are still a lot of vacation cases to go. It's going to be an ongoing rolling basis for the next, you know, several years, frankly.
Thank you.
So when doing the resentencing too, do you have to go back through and recalculate the criminal history score?
Yes.
That's the primary issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually what's happened is there's a possession charge somewhere in the person's criminal history that now gets vacated and moved out.
Yep.
So you gotta recalculate the score and then resentence. Some cases are simple because maybe it's an adjustment of one and the standard range sentence doesn't really change that much.
Right.
And sometimes we can basically agree on where we're at there. If you get multiple counts of possession that are getting vacated, there's a big change in the range. And then sometimes that original was a plea agreement. So there was charges out there that were dismissed in exchange for the plea agreement that now has changed, right? It starts to get much more complex.
The other, to add to that, the law changes. So what a sentencing scheme was in 1995 is different from 2005 and 2007. So you have to go back to the right year and what was the law and the sentence for that year and apply that. You can't look at what is 2022 and this SRA for that time, the sentencing guidelines for that time period.
I can imagine it is very complex, and once you start looking at the criminal history score, it's, yeah.
Oh, I can add one additional thing regarding the personnel. We actually have two 4-day-a-week law clerks for the summer that are part of the conviction review unit. So they're working on some appeals, but they're also working on learning how to do sentencing calculations. Obviously, they are not the final word, an attorney reviews that. But they were, and when we went to the University of Washington to law school to recruit for law students, that was something that they were interested in because State v. Blake is a big topic at law school right now, and they were excited to be able to put something on their resume that they were working on State v. Blake cases in Thurston County. So that's kind of a little segue, a little fun segue.
I have a quick question. For folks who have taken a plea and then those other charges were dismissed, then those have to be readdressed? Or
well, there's an
am I asking
unresolved legal issue right now about what happens in a plea agreement where the state maybe chose to dismiss charges in exchange for a plea and other charges, and now that's changed, right? Because of Blake. Some judges have ruled that the state is bound by the original agreement and you just resentence at whatever the new range is. Some courts have held, no, it actually can open up the plea agreement again, and you're essentially gonna renegotiate a new plea agreement without the possession charges, okay? And the fact that not all courts are on the same page is another complexity.
Sure.
Because there's no appellate guidance right now. There's cases that are pending, but there's no decision on point, at least not that I know of yet.
No, it's all still waiting, and that's
Then there could be another thing that we have to go way back and look at if we've made decisions and
Well,
then
and that's when John talked about it, you know, because plea negotiations go on all the time, Patrick knows it, and the state will give up charges or give up to get an agreed upon time. Here's the time that we're looking at getting to. And the argument, what John's saying is that, well, wait, then we're not getting the benefit of our bargain. You know, we made a bargain and that's not what we're getting now because of the state Supreme Court's decision. I had that exact case come up. In fact, it was one of the co-defendants of Mr. Connor. And that was the whole deal, was the amount of time that he was doing. I reduced things down, and so arguably, I could have made the argument, we're going back to square zero, and oh, by the way, I still have somebody to try. You can withdraw your plea and you just go to trial if you don't want to do this. I had to sit and really kind of sit there and go, but wait a second, did he do anything affirmatively to get this benefit? No. He didn't file a motion, this was something that came out from the Supreme Court. And so I ultimately allowed him to be resentenced back in the standard range minus a couple of points. But there's certain cases, he's agreed to help testify, so that's a good thing. But there's certain cases where I could see that not being the case. No, we agreed on this time frame, and now this has changed it. I'd knock down a Rob 1 to a Rob 2 or something along those lines. And if you have the ability to go forward from an evidentiary standpoint, there's going to be some prosecutors on a particular case that might say, yeah, okay, all bets are off. So it'll be an interesting way to see how the courts go about it.
And of course, there's consultation with the victim too, right? So if you're dealing with a violent crime that's being resentenced,
Required.
we are required, and that's why we have an advocate working on it, but the victim may come in and say, now, wait a minute, the plea agreement was this is what, I felt was just in my case. And now it's shifted down here, but state, why don't you go back to here and get the original deal, right? So there's all these things coming together. That's why it's so hard to say, when you say what's the average, it's really no average, right? Because every case has this kind of uniqueness to it, and you just gotta take them as they come and, try to work through it.
That's very interesting. Any other questions or comments on the Blake updates? Awesome. Did we have anything for COVID updates that we want to talk about, or?
John, did you want to?
Well, and we might want to talk about this when we move into the Blake, or the COVID
We have a meeting of.
discussion, but I'll just say, I think Patrick and I are both in the same boat where right now the hiring environment is extremely challenging. I was at my prosecutors meeting last week, all of 39, and this is statewide, right? There is a significant lack of qualified candidates for prosecution and defense. So we have these positions that we haven't been able to fill.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the biggest challenge that we've got right in front of us, is that it's been difficult to actually even get started working on some of the backlog, especially the Superior Court unfiled backlog, because every lawyer I've got is still working on primary caseload. And we can talk more about that at Blake Challenge. But one of the things I will be putting on the table at that meeting that I wanted to have Romero start thinking about and maybe talk to the board about is extending end dates on that funding on the project positions. Because I think one of the challenges we're finding in our hiring is right now the end date is 2023. And so a candidate's gonna be looking at the job market out there and seeing lots of other prosecutor jobs across the state that are regular full-time. And then looking at the Thurston County one, which is a project through 2023. And I'm worried that we're not competitive. So it's something I wanted to start talking about and thinking about, extending the end dates. And we may want to think about that with Blake too, because I don't know the restrictions on the funding sources. That's a factor, I'm sure. But the reality is, as you heard, the Blake work is gonna go on too for well into 24. Backlog right now, reality is, I'd be pretty pleased if we had backlog resolution in 2025, right? That's kind of how I feel about it right now, and that, I don't know, that might even be realistic. I don't know how Patrick or Judge Wilson feel about that, but I'm pessimistic that we're anywhere near backlog resolution in 2024.
Yeah, we can talk about this later. Now, I just think I agree, and 2025 would be a very half full view, frankly. And I think it's worth mentioning not just hiring environment, but all the stakeholders that have been operating in this environment. It has been incredibly challenging for for everybody. And, we're losing good people, frankly, due to a lot of factors, but it's taken its toll. So not only are we seeing turnover, but we're also seeing the same challenges in recruitment, which the bottom line is does not move the ball in terms of backlog resolutions. It exacerbates it in some cases, right? So if we have, attorneys moving on, then we have caseloads that need to be reassigned, and some of those on the 365, we're changing attorneys. It goes to a new attorney. That entire caseload of maybe 100, 200 cases go to a new attorney, and there's just a combination of things that haven't really. I think 2025 would be, very optimistic.
Yeah, we'll dive into more detail here at 4 o'clock, because the constraint perhaps comes from the funding sources. And that, I think we just need to have a conversation really about this, and see how we can make the best out of the funding sources versus the challenges that we have in hiring attorneys.
And again, just recognizing that that's another coming out, but just like what Patrick said with Blake starts from the defense side. We're not gonna be responding, we have to wait to kind of get tapped in the game. COVID's the exact opposite. COVID starts on the prosecutor side, where we're screening the cases on the cases, whether we're even gonna go forward and even bring them into the system. Or we're obviously still trying to explore and develop our pre-charge diversion. So you don't have the courts and you don't have all those, but then there's gonna be the cases that'll obviously go forward. So it's the exact 180 degree for our office when it comes to the COVID screenings. That all starts with us, and that's a huge resource to start with, to try and screen out and make sure we're going forward and having resolutions that make sense, but that starts on the prosecutor side.
Any other questions or comments on that?
Is our
Well-
pay, oh, okay.
Sorry, Judge, go ahead.
Sure. On the backlog, I know we have a longer discussion at 4 o'clock, but I would echo what both John and Patrick said. Staffing is a big part from their two offices, because we are now obviously running trials, not the same number of trials we did pre-COVID, but we have been consistently running trials. But when we have a change of counsel, then trials get continued. And so when we define the backlog of the pending cases that are old, that aren't getting through trial, that's one category. And then I think we've been talking for many months about introducing the uncharged, and those haven't started to come in. So I think that, but what both John and Patrick said in terms of looking more like 2025 is realistic. I would say I continue to be optimistic. We've been running trials now for 3 or 4 months since our last no trial period. And we've had a lot of successes. We talked earlier about older cases. We did complete 2 very lengthy old cases to a resolution verdict. So we're wanting to acknowledge some progress, but not the pace that we hoped for. And it's taking longer than we had hoped for.
Up next, we have lead updates from Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. So I will provide a little bit of context real quick with where Thurston County Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion's at, some numbers, and then any questions people have. So we're coming up on our first full year of services provided through the LEAD program. And this program, just to remind everybody with the context, is focused on being person-centered, low barrier, harm reduction type model. All voluntary, and that I want to provide that context because I think we've had some pretty impressive enrollment numbers and outcomes related to this is all voluntary. These are people that have multiple challenges and barriers going on in their lives, and they're still electing to engage in services and make some pretty significant changes in their lives. So that piece acknowledged, we've the data is a little bit behind, like it always is, so not quite up to today, but I reran this today. Is around 206 referrals so far into the program. About 170 people have engaged throughout this last year, and there's about 80 people that are in active, full enrolled status working with case managers right now. And with the people who have helped throughout the year, a lot of them have disengaged because they've moved to other areas. We've had a few people that have asked to be graduated. They've come to us and said, I've never completed anything in my life, and I'd like the acknowledgement of I've succeeded at something. I feel like I'm stable. I don't want to continue to use these resources. Someone else out on the streets can benefit from this resource. So those moments, those interactions with the team have been pretty powerful. We've had, again, using a harm reduction approach, we've had a lot of people want assistance accessing detox, treatment, transitioning into recovery housing. The past couple weeks, there's several occasions where I've talked to the peers and they were getting work supplies for people that are just starting full-time employment and rejoining the workforce. So a lot of impressive life-changing things happening. We had a vet that we just started working with that we're helping connect with some surgery. He's been living in some pretty severe chronic pain out on the streets for a lot of years and is finally seeing a surgeon to get that taken care of as the first step to engaging, and then ideally addressing some of his other barriers and difficulty in his life. The referral trends, we started out, I think it was pretty close to, well, maybe 2/3 law enforcement, about 1/3 other. It's balanced out a little bit more over time. We still get a lot of law enforcement referrals from our primary agencies that are referring. So that's the County Sheriff's Office, Tumwater, Lacey, and Yelm as the primary referrals. We get a few through Olympia, but they kind of have their own thing going on. So most of those referrals tend to come through the crew team or the Familiar Faces team. There's the community referrals include a lot of provider agencies, homeless outreach groups, crisis response. We've had a few come in through fire. And then more recently, we've had about 19 people to date that have self-referred to the program, which has been acknowledged a couple of times as being pretty impressive that people have faith in the program, see its real benefit, and are essentially vouching for this program to their friends and people out on the street. And being seen as a real resource, a group that can actually help people make some changes in their lives. And then several other legal system referrals. We get a lot of referrals from DOC. We've had a few referrals come through from the jail. And more recently, there have been a few that have come through where law enforcement, for whatever reason, needed to make an arrest, even though they wanted to refer to the program. So it was kind of a secondary referral to lead, although we've got to arrest on this contact that we're having. And at least one of those that I can remember, it was at the victim's kind of request, but that's how it went. But again, still law enforcement made the referral and saw the benefit for the person that they were coming in contact with. I wanted to, I'll pause for a second. Any questions about lead in Thurston County, those numbers, where we're going?
So just to clarify, Jason, now the referrals are 50-50 law enforcement and self-referrals? Is that all there means?
Yeah, so about 50% law enforcement, and then about 50% is kind of a mix of community referral, a small handful, those 19 that have self-referred, and there's another chunk of other kind of legal system partners, so
Okay.
DOC, probation, yeah. And one of the things that I'm really excited about that I want to talk about for a second after this pause is some improved data collection that we've been doing more recently. The state's kind of been redefining what we're supposed to collect and how we're supposed to collect it over this last year. So there's been a ton of work behind the scenes of trying to give the team tools that they need to be able to record things accurately and consistently. And I think we're finally there. So there's going to be a lot more detailed reporting that's able to come out in the near future. Any other questions about more general things? Okay. So one of the things that I'm really excited about on a data point is creating a data dashboard on a quarterly basis that can provide the community with an update about some of these numbers and the progress of the program. So what that will look like, we'll be reporting out on some items like like I just went over, total referrals, how many people are enrolled in the program, how many distinct services were provided, what are the demographics of the people that are enrolling in the program, a breakdown of referral sources, what types of linkages to care are happening. So like how many people were connected to detox, how many people were connected to housing resources, and then also direct client services that are provided. So that could be anything from giving someone out on the streets, naloxone, providing a bus pass, some food vouchers, a lot of kind of basic needs type supports. So that's going to be, like I said, captured and reported out on a quarterly basis to help give the community a better idea of what type of services are happening and how many people we're seeing and who we're seeing in the community. And the other thing that I'm really excited about that I kind of already mentioned is that we're celebrating a year of existing. So having a celebration next month to acknowledge that's going to include the case management team coming out, bringing some of the peers that have been involved in the program. At least one participant asked to talk about their experience with the program and the progression they've made in their life over the last year. So I'm really excited for that opportunity, and it's been a great program to be a part of, and it's powerful work that's happening on a daily basis. So happy to answer any other questions from the group. That's most of what I wanted to talk about.
Any questions for folks?
I'll just chime in on one thing though that Jason was talking about, is that we're expanding the arrest alternatives right now. So not just the social referrals coming from law enforcement, but actually starting to see some arrest referrals coming. We're focusing on Tumwater to develop the pilot so we can get our systems down internally in our office, because we handle the city of Tumwater's prosecution, so that's an easier place for us to start. But I want Ray to hear, we've actually started seeing some county referrals just almost by word of mouth, which has been really exciting. So it's already getting out there before we've even really started pushing it on the county level. So we're working on coordinating the Tumwater first, and then expanding through Tumwater, and then hopefully taking it to county. Once we get to Lacey and Yelm, then we've got to collaborate with the prosecutor's offices for non-felony referrals, because they've got to agree, hey, we won't go forward on it if they follow through and engage. So those are next steps too, but we're going to start seeing hopefully some more arrest alternatives. With the Blake decision, that's where all of our focus initially was going to be. So we've had to realize, just kind of rethinking it, it's taken a little bit of time, but that ball is definitely getting going. And from a data standpoint, we're developing a way for all the law enforcement agencies in Thurston County to know about both lead and Blake referrals. So if someone in Lacey comes into contact with somebody, they can ring them up and go, oh, hey, 6 months ago you had a Tumwater lead referral. How'd that go? Or if somebody's had 5 referrals, well, maybe they need to do something different. And so we're working on developing that data internally for both law enforcement and then ultimately our office and Jason's folks too. So there's a lot of things happening there as well.
Wonderful. Any other questions or comments? Awesome. So for next steps, I think that the obvious things are we'll just continue talking about the 365 plus population. Hopefully at the next meeting we can get another update on that, but it sounds like it's going to be a very busy summer for both the Public Defense Office and the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. So we'll continue to get updates on that. Hopefully at the next meeting too, Wayne might have some more information on the pilot program that we're discussing for that triage facility. I'm trying to think. I think those are kind of the 2 big things, and then of course we'll continue talking about Blake and COVID as we can. If you guys think it's appropriate too, both for Patrick, the courts, and John, your office, I'd be happy to put the job postings up on the new Law and Justice updated website. We could share that kind of on the center column. Obviously, I don't think it'll help much, but happy to do that if we think it might help.
We're taking any opportunity. So
You never know where the lead will come from.
Yeah, so happy to get those added. I can work with maybe Megan to help.
Social media.
Yeah, and put them on social media
we-
too.
Terry.
Yeah, so we can definitely work on getting some of that out there. Are there any just kind of general comments, questions, or anything for the good of the order?
I have something that I want to just put out to start a conversation, not today, and this may not be the right venue, but it impacts our work. And so I want to think about, who needs to be at the table and try to create a venue to talk about this. But there is a not very well known provision in the Sentencing Reform Act that allows judges to give credit for day credit for time served towards a jail sentence, a county jail sentence, for any time served in a approved community alternative, or words to that effect. And the definition of that in statute is basically wide open. And in looking at the legislative history of that provision, it was intentionally that, because this was intended to allow counties and communities to create a jail alternative at the local level using whatever resources they have in their community, and then using that as a way to alleviate and manage county jail population. I just started to talk to a few people individually about this pre-COVID, right? And then when COVID came in, it just didn't make sense because we weren't working on the kinds of cases that would be eligible for a program like that anyway. So I kind of backburnered it. But now that we're coming out of COVID and we're starting to talk about backlog and some of the unfiled cases that'll start to go through Superior Court, that will start to increase the number of local sentences I'm anticipating over time, gradually over time. And so I'm thinking maybe now's the time to start that conversation. So if it takes us 6 months or a year to actually kind of figure out what that looks like, the timing might be just about right when we're really starting to dig into that backlog full force. And that would be for cases, say, that we didn't feel were appropriate for diversion. We're going through kind of a standard prosecution, but they're not going to DOC. They're going to stay local in our county jail. The other thing that made me think that the timing is good here is that we're in the process of opening the resource hub. And I think that might be an element of whatever we might look at. So I just felt like now's the time to take a look at that statute and take a look at what we've got, what our assets are here in the community, and think about, are there some alternatives where we would rather have somebody do something in an alternative and get day-for-day credit for time served towards a jail sentence, rather than sitting it out in our facility. Just another tool for the toolbox, if you will. So I'm just gonna put that on. We can put a placeholder in it, but maybe a few of us can get together and talk about it and kind of figure out, who needs to be at the table on that. A couple of years ago, I think Patrick and I talked about it, Todd and I talked about it. So there's a few people out there that know that this has been rattling around in my head, and I'm ready to, I'd like to get something more formal going. So that's my spiel for the day.
I think that's great, because I think it's something you and I have talked about too, and Christy in our meetings, where we have this discussion too of, as we start coming out of COVID, we're going to have cases that are tried or there are plea deals and they maybe need to go to the jail, and we may have this large population all of a sudden shifting towards the jail. And so having something in place that could be an alternative to that is definitely something worth talking about. So I don't know if we want to set up a meeting for a separate group or put time on the next JRT agenda for this. I'm not sure what everyone feels is appropriate, but
I almost feel like maybe it might be worthy of a couple of specific meetings outside of JRT, since we've got lots of other stuff on our plate.
Yeah.
And anybody who's interested in coming to the table, happy to coordinate it, happy to work with you, Leah, to coordinate it, however we want to do it. I'm totally open.
yeah, I can work with you and Christy then to get something scheduled, and anyone who wants to participate in that, just shoot me an email and we can get you looped into that discussion, and we'll set up some meetings for that specific topic moving forward.
Okay.
Anything else from folks? Patrick, I saw you on mute.
I'll be there. Yep. Have you on that.
I figured you'd be there, Patrick. You're kind of important. You'd be kind of an important voice to have at the table.
Well, and it's another one. We can talk about it some more. Probably at this meeting is, some of the changes in the law with LFOs that we're seeing is we need to really have in place a program that allows individuals to request community restitution in lieu of payment, and we haven't really adopted that program. So that just noodle on that too, because that's something at some point we'll have to adopt.
Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, both of those are in the same statute,
Yes.
actually, the ability to convert time to community service or
And
community
the
restitution and
financial.
then the alternative, so.
Very good.
Well, if there are no other questions or comments, I will give you all the gift of 36 minutes, which I'm sure is wonderful for all of you to hear about. And with that, we'll get some minutes out to everybody shortly in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, if you have any questions or need anything, just let me know and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Thank you. Good meeting.
All right, everybody.
Conversation.